Explosions rock the night. Summoned by a messenger, a young Turos and John Tacardi from the sky island of Meridian race to its rescue. Men dressed in black with red goggles, armed with short swords, climb the ropes that tie the ship down. "What do they want?" Turos shouts as they approach. "We don't have anything valuable on board other than the ships themselves." Beside him is a young blonde woman, Ideria, who suggests that maybe that's what they want. John organizes the response as the crew of the boat fights back. Small catapults hurl incendiaries up at the two attacking craft. "They won't take this ship!" he shouts, drawing a long knife from his belt. "No ship is worth someone's life, John," Turos shouts, finally climbing on board himself. He then climbs on top of one of the catapults and orders the man working it to launch him. This guy hesitates. Turos is the future minister of Meridian, after all, and his boss. He's the one paying for this venture. And his boss just told him to launch him into a life-or-death situation. He is obviously not thrilled with this decision. Turos remains adamant. "You will take my word over your orders. Now do it!" The man does. Turos lands in the rigging of the ship in the middle distance. Meridian builds these ships, remember, and Turos is almost as comfortable in those ropes as he is on land. Even with a sword in one hand, he moves effortlessly, cutting through the attacking force. Above him, the sailors down below land a hit on one of the ships, and the attacking craft explodes. On the lowest ship, John punches his way through the goons. "Get off my ship!" he cries out. He swings around just in time to see Ideria smash a board over the head of the nearest goon. "He sent you, didn't he? You work for Ilahn!" The second attacking ship is hit. The resulting explosion damages the middle ship, the one that Turos is on. So despite the innovation that this craft represents, the money that Meridian sunk into it, he figures that if these people want this ship, well, they can have it. He cuts the rope that keeps it secured down below. Then he leaps down, tackling two of the goons who were pressing in on Ideria. She shouts to see him, and he lays into them with eager fists. "Get your hands off of her!" This was not the beginning of Turos and Ideria's relationship, though. It all began in the simplest of ways, actually. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown episode 32.12 of Meridian, Ideria's Choices and Ilahn's Desires. In truth, the pair have known each other since they were kids, but Sephie starts our story where her father did. It was an exciting day on Meridian. A newly finished ship was getting ready to launch, and so it's a day of celebration. Dozens of people have gathered. Contests of various skill have been set up. On some of them, men climb vertical poles in a speed race. Chocobos run chariot races. There is a balancing contest on a log, mock combat wearing wooden cages, and many small single-piloted ships swoop through the air. There is food, there is drink, and there is more than enough excitement to go around. But that's not where we find Ideria. Tucked away beneath a tree, sitting with her back to it atop a folding chair, is young Ideria. A small satchel of charcoal or crayons sits next to her. In her lap is a sketch pad. She has a small telescope set up next to her, allowing her to gaze at whatever her current subject is. She is dressed beautifully, in a pink gown that reaches her sandaled feet. Her hair is tucked away in a complicated braid. A small golden circle sits on her forehead. Walking along the nearby road are Turos and John. Turos has a round face and luscious brown hair. He is dressed in an ornate vest decorated with gold, displaying his station as the future minister of the island. John is square-jawed with blonde hair. His clothing is more plain, a simple shirt and pants, but it still looks good. It fits well, displaying thick arms trained by building and working on ships. Turos spots the young artist and stops in his tracks. John has to remind him who that is. Her parents are the ones who designed that new one-man ship. They just got back from a designing tour, and that is their daughter. Turos is dumbstruck by this information. Ideria? The skinny one who was always covered in paint? That's her? John seems amused by this. We've changed too, Rose. It has been more than a few years. So John strikes up a conversation with Ideria, giving Turos a chance to try to make a new first impression. He compliments her art, and while he does this, we can see that nearby, watching, are her parents. Her mother points out this conversation to her husband. Trouble, dear. However, Ideria has been trouble figuring out who Turos is. He clearly seems to know her, and she's like, Turos? And then it connects. Oh, Turos, you're the minister's son. Excuse me. Ideria then snatches up all of her supplies and starts to rush away, and she runs directly into someone else. This man is dressed in red and blue. His hair is a darker brown than his brother's, but it's cut shorter. His thin, slightly longer face is easily recognizable as a young Ilahn. Ideria starts apologizing for running into him. I'm so sorry. They start to pick up her art supplies, and he smiles politely. I was actually hoping to run into you, although not quite so literally, end quote. Turos cuts in, bringing Ideria the telescope that she left behind. He then immediately excuses himself. Clearly, she was in a hurry. He doesn't want to be a bother. Ilahn, however, lingers. He is clearly upset at having his riz interrupted by Turos, but he plays it off pretty well. He would love to join Ideria on one of her journeys someday. After all, as the second son of Meridian, he isn't tied to it like Turos is. All of Demetria can be his if he wants it, Ilahn says, kissing the back of her hand. And you deserve someone who can give you the world. He leaves, and there you have it. The basic premise of this story is now laid out before us. Ideria Garsken is the daughter of ship designers, and now an artist herself. She has been traveling the world with them and plans to continue doing so. Turos and Ilahn are the heirs of Meridian, and both of them appear to have a crush on Ideria. Turos's feels much more relaxed here in this scene, like he sees a pretty woman, he flirts with her, and it's clear that she either isn't interested or she's just too nervous to handle the attention, so he plays this smooth, right? The introduction was made, he did what he could, he walks away and hopes for the best. Ilahn's interest is much more obvious, clearly. Despite Turos being the one to approach Ideria first, Ilahn's approach feels much more practiced. Like Turos feels calm and welcoming, because he is, it would seem. Ilahn feels more calm and controlled, as if he is trying to be charming, where Turos just is charming. Ideria's uncertainty, by the way, does lean in a specific direction. There are clear vocal cues. When Turos excuses himself after he brings the telescope back, he says that he's sorry for interrupting her, and she quietly says, "I'm not sorry," before she gives up the thought, and then he's gone already. She clearly likes him, she just doesn't know how to handle that because she's been so used to being by herself or with her parents over all of these years. So we now go into the rest of the story knowing that Turos and Ideria end up together. After all, we've seen the end result. Sephie, we've been reading about her for 12 issues now. So the real question is what brings them together, and how is that going to piss off Ilahn? Before I get back to the story itself, I do want to pause and let's take a moment to bask in the artwork here. Podcast listeners, I'm sorry that you cannot really hear this with your ears, and I cannot do the art justice with my words. Part of the concept of CrossGen Chronicles is that it was going to be drawn by some of the best talent in the comic book industry, and it would be released quarterly every 4 months, giving them a chance to really strut their stuff. 4 months? It might have been 3 months. After issue 1, that meant that Chronicles was drawn by penciler George Perez, and by Stan Lee's typewriter. Oh, he kills it. And I mean, this isn't news if you've ever seen Perez's artwork before, but given the time to fill in his pages, he just does some amazingly detailed work here. Every page is hyper detailed. That image of the celebration that I described with all these contests going on and people eating and drinking, that's a 2-page spread. And it looks like something out of a Where's Waldo book. There's so much going on. It's just detail after detail to try to take in. And then add into the fact that this is the first time that we've seen Perez draw characters like Turos, John, or Ilahn, and they're all, I would argue, about 20 years younger than in the main Meridian comic, but they still look like themselves. Turos has his round face and his longer hair. Ilahn's face has his high cheekbones and sharp eyes. John has his square jaw and, like, intense captain's look. Perez manages to take both Middleton's and McNiven's interpretations of these characters, and he blends them together and still manages to present it as his own. It's great. I will say his clothing styling is a little bit more fantasy than either Middleton or McNiven, both of whom... Middleton's clothing really lent itself more towards, like, simplicity, a lot of cloths, not a lot of ornamentation. McNiven's style is a lot more detailed, but up to this point, again, he's been pretty controlled with what his looks are. Perez really leans into almost kind of a Jack Kirby-ian style of design for a lot of the clothing here on the celebration, where people have a lot of big circles on them, a lot of buckles, a lot of sharp colors, or big billowing capes. Especially Ilahn wears a big billowing cape in this issue. And it's not, again, it's not bad. It really leans into that idea of this was kind of a golden age for these characters. They're all in their youth. They're all in their prime. They've all got money and resources. The future's laid out ahead of them. But it is visually distinct for this era of Meridian versus everything that we have seen since. Finally, art-wise, one of my favorite touches for this particular comic is Ideria's sketch work throughout the issue. In this comic, there are panels that are actually presented to us as pages of Ideria's sketches and drawings. And to make them feel like that is the truth, these particular panels are uninked, but they are still colored over. This gives them like a colored pencil or colored chalk look. It feels a little bit more like a storybook, actually, which I think is really appropriate because Meridian kind of feels a bit like a storybook fantasy tale. And because for Sephie, reading her mother's logs, this essentially is a storybook tale. It just happens to be real. She is reading this account in her mother's own words. This is a story that we as an audience are witnessing, but Sephie is reading it. And I think that's a really cool, like, meta thing they have going on in the background. George Perez was inked in this issue by Mike Perkins, who was a penciler in his own right, but was hired as an inker by CrossGen for some reason. Perkins would eventually go on to become a full-time penciler for CrossGen, but still, he does really great work over Perez's lines here. And especially the idea to not ink Ideria's sketches, that was such a clever choice. I don't know whose choice it was. I don't know if that was Perez, Perkins, or author Barbara Kesel, but I like it. The pair are then joined by Laura DePuy, who was simply one of the best in the business, who still remains one of the best in the business. Given how detailed Perez's work is, I think that it's amazing that she got this issue not only colored, but colored so well. The next day, Ideria heads to the docks to set out on her journey. Evidently, Ideria was a bit of the sensation on the island. She was already 30 years old, and she had spent more time off of Meridian than on it, and she had no plans to stop now. In fact, she greets John in the morning light. The pair joke about how popular she's become, indicating a casual familiarity between them. It feels like John has probably often served as the captain on her family's trips. His job here is to deliver a new ship to its destination, and it doesn't really matter how long it takes, which doesn't make sense to me as the son of a long-haul trucker. So when Ideria requests a stop to just kind of like sightsee, he's fine with it. We're going to get there in the end. Everything's going to work out. Ideria then rattles off a list of places to stop at, things to see, and then she just kind of hangs her head. She just cannot seem to focus. I'm sorry, John. I was so excited for this trip. I've been designing it for ages, and now the only thing that she can think about is staying here. All because of a silly smile. John leans onto the table and smiles at her. So, who's the lucky man? No one, Ideria shouts, and you don't tell him. And I love to see John struggling not to laugh or smile at her distress. This is just so cute. Turns out that since her return to Meridian, Turos has kind of always ended up near Ideria. At first, it really did seem like they would just cross paths. They are, after all, living on an island. But then Ideria caught herself making sure that she would be in a place where she could be easily spotted by him. It seems like he's always with her now, even when she was alone inside of her mind. And we see a sketch of Turos in her study. Ideria doesn't want to leave him, but she also can't bear the thought of never leaving the island again. She just appreciates her freedom too much. John suggests that she test out both of the options. Whichever pulls on your heart, that's what you keep doing. But tragedy struck. A careless pilot and a shipment of ore exploded near the rim of Meridian. Ideria's mother and father were in a small cafe having dinner. Ideria was supposed to be with them, actually, but instead she was with Turos. And good thing she was, because it's the only reason she didn't die with them. The people of Meridian did band together to weather this trouble, but unfortunately her parents couldn't be saved. In the aftermath, Turos expected them to be joined any day now, but Ideria had other thoughts. While Turos is happy to have her stay on Meridian, his brother and father are not. Ilahn asks her to actually leave the island with him. He will treat her like a queen, and if he paired with any other woman, that woman would just suffer in comparison. Could Ideria's conscience bear that? Which, by the way, is an absolutely
no swearing
up way to propose to a woman. Turos and Ilahn's father then tells Ideria that he's had an outside party brought in to oversee the construction of her parents' experimental ship. Basically, she is free to leave Meridian whenever she likes. He knows that Turos and Ideria care for each other, but Turos' responsibility is to Meridian. He has to marry someone who is young enough to govern with him and give him an heir. And at 30 years old, Ideria can't guarantee that. Ideria's own nature seemed to call her away from the island. The danger of Ilahn threatened her, and even Turos' father didn't see her as a good fit for him. As far as Ideria is concerned, she has to leave. So she writes Turos a love letter saying goodbye and wishing him well. She included a small self-portrait with it, secured inside of a locket. But the messenger was waylaid in the night by one of Ilahn's thugs. He is the one who ended up with the letter and the locket. And this is the very same locket that we still see Ilahn wear in the modern day. Despite this, Turos heard about her decision to leave, and he was hurt by it. Especially since, from his perspective, she didn't even have the guts to tell him it herself. Turos went to his friend John and basically poured his heart out one night, seeking a kind ear and some advice. His parents don't care for Ideria as a match, that much is clear. They haven't forbidden them from marrying or anything like that, but they've made their distaste noticed. John suggests that Turos should come with him when they head out, when he goes to deliver this new ship. You know, he could do with an adventure, see the world, maybe clear his head a little bit. It would be good for him. However, Turos doesn't think that he should run from his problems. That won't help John. There'll still be problems when I get back. It just might help, John replies. Once you're aboard, it doesn't matter if you're the future minister of Meridian. I'm the captain. I make the rules. I'll be giving orders. I'll be enforcing laws. You know, I can even perform, marriages. Even that famous local artist who was going along on the trip will have to respect my authority. Turos turns to his friend and smiles. When do we leave? The following morning, Ideria scans the crowd that has gathered to see the ships off. She is disappointed to not see Turos in it. She figured that he would at least see her off, even if she did break his heart. And the truth is, Turos is there. He's just hidden in the empty ship that they're towing. John, on the other hand, assures her that, it's probably for the best that he isn't here. Turos probably didn't want to be tempted into leaving with her after all. He has to stay on the island. And with this, Ideria finally breaks. With tears in her eyes, she runs off of the ship. He's too good, John! He's worth staying for! Sorry for my absolutely terrible performance. I love these kids. But now John is caught in a bind. Exposing Turos would create a bit of a scandal. The future minister of Meridian leaving Meridian to go, shack up with an artist on a trip. It would embarrass both of them in front of the public as well, and probably make it impossible for this trip to actually leave. This is a lesson. Don't get involved, he sighs. This isn't your problem. You didn't have to do any of this. He then tells his pilot to take the ships out, but do it slow. Give them a show. On the island, Ideria now sadly watches as the ships leave. Ilahn approaches her, congratulating her decision to stay. She must have gotten his gift and seen the wisdom in choosing him. Awkwardly, Ideria says, "No, I stayed for Turos." Ilahn pauses. His half-lidded eyes remain calm, but his eyebrows raise. Really? For Turos? That's ironic, given that he's hidden on that ship waiting to surprise you. Oh, floop! Ideria's eyes go wide. She will not lose him now, and she will not be stuck on this island with Ilahn. Ideria turns, her eyes scan the positioning of the ships really quickly, and then she runs off of Meridian. Leaping through the air, Ideria lands on the deck of the ship, and it is easily the most reckless thing that she's ever done. John helps her get to her feet, glad that she's changed her mind, otherwise it would have ruined everything, and once she's standing, Ideria finally asks, "John, where is he?" John points, as Turos slides down the tow rope, shouting for Ideria. When he lands, they hug, relieved to finally get to do the one thing that they have been wanting to do: be together. On the rim of Meridian, Ilahn's eyes thin. You may have won her, Turos, but only for now. A messenger alerts Ideria to a package, a gift, that has been left for her. Remember how Ilahn asked if she got his gift? Well, this is it. She makes an excuse to Turos about it and goes inside of her private cabin. Inside is a small, ornate, beautiful gift box. Ideria opens it with a click. Inside is a large, well-cut ruby gem set inside of a golden ring. There is also a small note. She reads it. Quote, "Ideria, please reconsider and return. This gem is my promise to you, the world and more. Do not underestimate my desire. I will win you. As a woman or as a widow, you will be mine." End quote. Cursing Ilahn's name, Ideria hucks the box out the nearest window. She takes a moment to calm herself, to let this anger, this disgust, pass. Turos finds her, and he's taken the act of risking her life to jump onto this boat as a sign that they want to be together. John can marry us out here if you're willing, he says, which admittedly I understand why he's really concerned about this, but this does not seem like the time to ask. Ideria presses against him, burying her face in his shirt. That's a decision they should make on solid ground, she says. And that's enough for Turos. He strokes her hair, shushing her. Don't worry. We have all the time in the world. There is no hurry. But John, watching from above, is pensive. There's no air if you wait too long. Back on Meridian, Ilahn goes to what appears to be a regular bookshop. The bookkeeper greets him, a thin, kinda creepy-looking old man, recognizing Ilahn instantly. "Here for more private entertainment?" Wink. Ilahn is not. He tells this man to contact those men. If he does, then Ilahn will see this man's debts forgiven. "Well, that sounds like a good deal to me. I will see to it right away, your ministership." Ilahn turns to leave. "Send word to the minister's residence once you're done." He pulls out the locket and gazes at the picture of Ideria that she sent to Turos. "You have chosen unwisely, but I'll set things right." Okay, that's a lot of comic and not a lot of breakdown. First off, the opening scene with all of the combat and the mercenaries and stuff, that is in this comic, I promise you that, but it is not presented to us at the beginning. I'm actually pulling an old Chris Claremont writing trick, opening the issue up with a quick action sequence to draw in the reader, or in this case, you listeners, and then you flash back to how we got there. Please let me know if you found this engaging, or if I should just stick to the standard presentation of the issue. I'm experimenting a little bit here with the format, but I also don't want to destroy the integrity of these stories. I'm trying to present them to you as organically as I can for a dude just talking about the comic books. Author Barbara Kesel sticks to her writing guns, opening up the issue with Ideria sketching while Meridian celebrates. This decision really speaks to Kesel's slow and steady style of writing. She trusts that if you're buying this particular issue, then it must be because you like Meridian, and if you like Meridian, then you obviously like her slower style of writing. She takes the time to establish who all of our players are, although there is a clear focus on Ideria for a number of reasons. Obviously, this is because Ideria is the focus of this particular issue. The story is told from her perspective, from her artworks and scrolls, and it's really the only time that we get to spend with Ideria in all of Meridian's publication history. We actually spent quite a bit of time with Turos through Sephie. She is constantly referring to his lessons throughout the comic, which shaped her as a person and as a minister, and at this point, I actually feel like I've got a pretty good handle on who Turos is, despite him being dead since issue 1. Ideria, however, is a blank slate for the most part. The only bits that we know about her is what we picked up basically in Meridian issue 13, and she was way more confident there than she is here. The Ideria that we meet here in CrossGen Chronicles is really quiet and withdrawn. She's a bit of a stranger to being on Meridian, after all. If she has been traveling Demetria with her parents for years, it makes sense that she would be distant, quiet, and maybe a bit more withdrawn from the crowded celebration that's going on around her. But she also clearly isn't afraid of going out or being approached. She set up her sketching station on a footpath. She's easily spotted there, and of course she is gorgeously dressed up. She's not just in like a plain shirt and pants. She's in an ornate pink gown. Her hair's done up, her circlet's on, she's got jewels on. She looks great. And I don't think that Ideria was trying to catch anyone's attention. That does come later once she sees Turos and she locks in. But I do think that this shows us that Ideria is comfortable when she is apart from other peoples. She is more used to being an observer than a doer. It is also clear that she's more open around people that she knows when, the next day, she greets John Tacardi on the ship. The two of them chat like old friends, they're teasing each other, talking really comfortably. I don't know if John has captained every journey that Ideria's family has gone on, but it's clear that they know each other and that they're comfortable with each other. And remember, it was John who was like, oh, hey, Ideria, you remember my buddy, Turos? When they opened up the issue, indicating, again, a closer friendship between John and Ideria than Turos and Ideria had at this point. Now, we do get to infer quite a bit about Turos, Ideria, and Ilahn's past history. It is clear that they all know each other. When Turos spots her, he remembers Ideria as a paint-splattered child. Kesel is not only telling us that they knew each other as children and that Ideria already had an interest in the arts, but that they have been apart for quite some time. Ideria has had plenty of time to go from a child to a woman, and when she meets with John, she even comments on how everyone seems to think that she has changed. That's because she has, physically, mentally, but to Ideria, of course, she is herself, but to people like Turos and Ilahn, she's a completely different person. Turos' attraction to her feels a bit more natural in this scene. Like, he sees a pretty woman, he strikes up a conversation, he's just charming enough to be remembered, but then he ducks out when it becomes socially appropriate to do so. Ideria has clearly indicated she doesn't want to talk to him. He's not going to press the issue. Ilahn, however, clearly recognizes Ideria. No one introduces him, nobody helps him out here. He's the one who walks up to her and goes, Ideria, I was hoping to see you. He went into this with a plan. Maybe Ilahn had a crush on Ideria from when they were younger, or maybe he's already thinking with the strategic politicalness of their marriage in mind. We know that Ilahn will eventually marry in order to gain money and status when he marries into Catador. So is his attraction to Ideria one of real, genuine love, or is he just looking to attach his own fortunes to Meridian's most famous designer's daughter? Is this love for him, or is this politics? The back and forth stuff between Turos and Ideria's relationship is adorable, and I like that maybe Turos was seeking her out to flirt with her, but then she starts making sure that he can find her. That is so cute. And I love Turos hiding on the spare ship in order to surprise her, but then Ideria loves him too much to leave, so she's like, I'm just going to get off the ship, and then she's got to jump back on. Given how long it takes us in this issue to get to, like, a physically violent, like, exciting action sequence, like, to get our blood pumping, it is really amazing to me that Barbara Kesel makes the timeless drama of two young people so compelling. It's really easy in the world of comic books to focus on just like the stakes of a universe or a planet or the multiverse, with the focus being on combat and bright color costumes and colorful explosions and stuff like that. And it's really just refreshing and ultimately pleasing to read a comic about two people who like each other, but they don't know how to express it, and they're being pulled apart by their respective families. We got a little, not quite Romeo and Juliet, because they aren't, like, expressly forbidden from loving each other, but I love that the drama between the two of these characters is ultimately what makes this issue work so well. I don't need Turos to punch out Ilahn and be like, she's mine, Ilahn, or anything like that. I love just seeing them be themselves. And in terms of wanting something that is exciting, we have the absolutely creepiest version of Ilahn here. Oh my god. Like, Kesel somehow manages to level up Ilahn's bad guy vibes here, and he isn't, like, taking over the world or blowing up a town or rotting off some dude's arm or anything like that. When he tells Ideria in the letter that he will have her as his wife or as a widow, that's fucked up. I just spat all over my computer setup saying that. That's how serious I take this kind of stuff. It's so wrong that I'm not even going to use floop as a replacement word. Or earlier, when he says that forcing any other woman to marry him to suffer his relationship is Ideria's fault. He blames her for not choosing him so another woman will suffer. That is twisted. That is wrong. Who tries to get a woman to marry them by saying that every other woman would suffer as his wife? That's not a selling point. How do you think that makes you appealing, Ilahn? Ilahn is clearly attempting to manipulate Ideria's compassion for other people, but that's the very thing that makes it
No swearing.
Dude, he clearly doesn't care for Ideria, he just wants her for his own. It goes to show you how wrong Ilahn was, even before he got the sigil. Everything that he's done since was already there. And we open Meridian with the knowledge that this guy very likely poisoned his brother, which led to his death. We know that Ilahn's not a good person. Kesel is just showing us that he's been a bad guy for an incredibly long time. But he's also a patient bad guy, right? This is how far back his feud with Turos goes. A one-sided feud, I remind you. And then he spends the next, 20, 30 years slowly poisoning Turos until he dies. If Ilahn wasn't a bad guy before this issue, he is certainly the bad guy now. The group's journey continues. Sephie notes that her mother's artwork is beautiful, but that it also seems to contain a touch of darkness from this point on, of decay, like there's something bad under the surface. Sephie recognizes that Demetria's whole existence is one of beauty and danger, life in the sky, risking the fall, life on the ground, risking things like the Selenog and toxins and accidents. But it almost feels like this darkness somehow reached out and touched Ideria personally. And given that last interaction with Ilahn, perhaps it did. We follow the sketchy artwork down to Ideria's paper. The ships are lowering to the ground. This area looks a lot like what we saw back in Meridian issue 12. It looks like the entrance to the caverns. We see a jagged, mountainous, dry area with an opening down into Demetria. We do see a pier or deck or bridge out over the water as well. On the ship, John is busy shouting a variety of orders. He's noticed that the toxic lines have moved inward since their last stop here. He orders the ballast dropped and the sails furled. A series of massive stones are dropped into the water, tied to the ships by rope. Men slide down them, ropes slung over their shoulder. I'm assuming that these guys were meant to tie the ship off to the dock, but instead they freeze. A strange sound echoes in the air. Unease passes over the ship. No one knows what that is, but John has heard rumors. The water below them churns, and then a massive sea beast explodes upward. This thing has a circular mouth lined with long, jagged teeth. Black eyes encircle the whole of the mouth, allowing this thing to see its prey from all angles. Multiple fins stick out from a thick, muscular, knobby body. This thing is big enough to swallow a man whole, and it slams its face into the ship. It does this again and again, even knocking Ideria from her place on the crossbar of the mast. They need to get the sails unfurled so that they can catch the wind, John shouts. But Turos has another idea. What they need is an anchor to drag them back upright. So he grabs a harpoon with a rope attached to the end, and he fires it into the creature's mouth. Blood erupts, and the monster drops back into the waters. As it flees, the rope is then pulled taut, and the ship is pulled back upright. The crew then scramble to unfurl the sails and tie off the support ropes to the pier. John finally shouts for Turos to cut his line, and the ship finally docks safely. Repairing the ship should take about 2 weeks, giving Turos and Ideria plenty of time to get to know the cavern city. John does ask Turos to get him a new harpoon, hero. Inside the caverns, we learn that the miners are extracting the ore that is used on some of the island cities to keep them afloat. Meridian actually doesn't use any additional ore. They prefer to live in balance with nature, as established previously in Meridian, but cities like Catadel or Torbel need that extra lift to balance out their weight. It is hard labor, but for a spot in the sky, it is worth it to these folks, Ideria says. Once they make it to the city proper, the pair splits up. Turos wants to learn how business works down here, which frees up Ideria to sketch. While they're busy doing their things, we see a familiar face, a young Minister Geress, deep in conversation with a short, orange-eyed female. The Muse assures Geress
that this man will help bring together the sky and the land. But not yet. He will just plant the seed.
Geress sends a messenger to meet with Turos, and he invites Turos and Ideria to a secret meeting. They're taken, of course, to Anheim. And gosh darn it, it looks even prettier under George Perez's pencils than it did the first time. Gah! This man's work is gorgeous. They then go over everything that we already know about Anheim. How it survived the cataclysm. It's got plants that break down the toxins in the soil. They don't want to be controlled by outside parties. And this really confuses our lead characters. They just look at each other and they're like, what can we do for you? The Muse steps forward.
She speaks of their child, who will wield fire and join the earth and the sky.
She then uses her orange words to share a vision with Ideria of Sephie.
She will bear this child but never know her, if she has the strength to do so.
Ideria sees the future and looks at Turos. He's busy being caught up in the idea of the two of them having a daughter together. He's thinking about the process, but Ideria can see even Ilahn's part in their future. The messenger from earlier returns. There's trouble on the visitor's ship. Before they rush off, Ideria hands the tube containing her artwork to Geress. Give this to her. I may never know her, but I would like her to know me. They then run outside, and we get the scene that I opened this issue with. Mercenaries are attacking the two ships. John and the crew are already fighting them back, so Turos and Ideria join them. Ideria knows that these men were sent by Ilahn, not just because Ilahn's a grade A major creep, but because she's also seen who he will become. Turos ends up cutting the second empty ship free, and they do fight off the mercenaries. Seeing Turos fight for their lives and his willingness to sacrifice that ship erases any worries that Ideria had about their coupling. The next time that he asks if she'll marry him, she says yes. Ilahn, meanwhile, has left Meridian. If Meridian couldn't be his, if Ideria couldn't be his, then he would need to find power another way. So he meets with the Minister of Kedador and is introduced to her daughter. She's a thin, small, quiet woman named Clarissa. "Pleased to meet you," she barely says. Ilahn stares at her, his emotions closely guarded. "Likewise," he replies. Ideria's sketches end with one of her wedding day. We see the ceremony was officiated by John. Turos and Ideria hold hands in the image with big smiles on their faces. "She was so beautiful," Sephie says, her eyes cloudy with tears. "I wish I'd known her." "She clearly knew you," Sephie says to the Muse of Giatan.
I have my roles to play. Here I am to urge you toward your destiny. There I was, so your mother.
Sephie hugs the scrolls to her chest. She finishes the Muse's thought. "So my mother could be here with me. Always. Thank you." Which brings us back around to Sephie's story and the present-day tale of Meridian. Kesel manages to get, within all of this drama, Kesel manages to get two action sequences into the back half of this book, and I love how different they feel, because they really do hit, back to back. The attack by the sea creature is fraught with danger, but it's also a natural danger, right? We've seen the Selenog before over in Meridian. We know that there are monsters on Demetria. Whatever this massive Leviathan worm thing is, it certainly fits the bill. I like the inventive thinking of Turos here. We know, after all, that he has spent most of his life on Meridian. He's never encountered anything like this before, but that still doesn't stop him from assessing the situation and coming up with a creative solution to it. It demonstrates his bravery. It shows us that it isn't in his nature to show off as well, because he isn't doing this to be a showboating hero. If you look at Jad throughout the course of Meridian, you can see there's a little bit of cockiness to him. There's a little bit of, I know that I'm good on a boat. I know that I'm comfortable with this, and I'm trying to impress people. Turos is literally just trying to keep everybody safe and alive. And after the encounter, Turos just goes about his business. He doesn't brag. He doesn't even look at Ideria and be like, "Did you see what I did? Did you see I fought the giant monster?" He even takes a gentle ribbing from John about being a hero. "Hey, get me another harpoon, hero guy." Turos is humble, he's calm, he's fast-thinking throughout this encounter. Kesel is showing us that Turos is kind of the total package, am I right? The second action sequence, however, has the much more sinister threat. These mercenaries were sent by Ilahn, and everybody in this fight comments that the mercenaries don't seem to care about the ships, which is weird, because if they were pirates, that's what they would be after, right? But they aren't. These guys are here to, it seems, kill Turos, Ideria, and their party. It's actually only because of the dumb luck of being attacked by that Leviathan that they weren't on the ship. It is totally possible that if they had stayed on the ship, let's say that monster didn't attack, and then they docked, and John's like, "Okay, we're going to go into the cavern for supplies or anything. Do you need anything?" Turos and Ideria may never have gotten the chance to go into the caverns. They may have just stayed on that ship. And then the mercenaries would have dropped down, they would have attacked, and who knows how that situation would have gone. But being attacked sent them into the caverns, so it's very possible that that Leviathan saved their lives. I almost wish the Muse of Giatan had set it up, but she didn't. Long-term wise, for the overall history of Meridian, there are two moments in the back half of this comic that I really like. The first is that this is the moment when Turos really feels like he became the Minister of Meridian by deed. He already had the authority, and you can see that other people defer to him throughout the issue. They know that he is going to inherit Meridian one day, and they treat him as such. But this is the moment when he assumed responsibility for the safety of other people. We saw in a previous issue of Meridian that Sephie remembered her father telling her that he had the authority of the ministership before he ever had the title. And with his death, Sephie inherited the title but had none of the power herself, until she went to the caverns and demanded their attention and respect. So that's not just a nice bit of continuity, but it also reinforces the thread between Turos and his daughter, showing you both how similar they are and how opposite they are, which is just really good storytelling. The second is this moment is part of what finally sells Ideria on marrying Turos. He battles to defend all of their lives, he personally defends her from the mercenaries, and when it comes down to it, the end result of this scene, he sacrifices the ships in order to save them all. Because important as those ships are, as important as the money sunk into those ships and the craftsmanship, and again, Meridian is an island that appreciates the craftsmanship of these boats, they aren't worth anybody's lives. People's lives do not matter more than property. Turos would give his life in order to protect Ideria's, and Ilahn would destroy anything in his way in order to accomplish his goals. Finally, we have the whole Anheim part of the story, and for the most part, we don't learn anything new here. I suppose we can confirm that the Muse appears to be ageless. She looks exactly the same in the flashbacks as she does in Sephie's present day, so whatever her skincare routine, it must work wonders. But like with before, artist George Perez did a great job of making sure that the Minister Garess looks like Minister Garess, just, again, younger. But again, excellent penciling work. I do think that it's a bit weird that Ideria gives Garess the tube of artwork here, asking him to pass it on to her daughter. We know that Ideria and Turos go on to visit Anheim multiple times in the future. We have seen them visit when they're pregnant with Sephie, after all. So maybe Ideria keeps adding artwork as they keep visiting, but it seems weird to make it such a moment here and make it seem like Ideria is never going to return when we know for a fact she's going to be a regular visitor there. So much so that the people of Anheim are like, oh man, Turos and Ideria, those kids were great. We sure do miss them and we're sad when they weren't able to visit again. This is probably the single weakest overall story point. I suppose there's one more thing, and we're going to get there, but this kind of stood out to me as a bit of a wonky bit of the story. Part of the time in Anheim is spent with the Muse gifting Ideria with the vision of the future. And unfortunately, we don't get to see what that vision is. We get to spend no time with it. It would have been nice to maybe get a panel teasing what's to come for Sephie, but we don't get to see those details at all. It's implied through dialogue that Ideria saw up to at least what we have seen of Meridian. She clearly knows that Sephie will return to Anheim. She knows that she's going to need to see this artwork, and she does mutter about Ilahn after she has the vision, indicating that she knows some degree of what he does. Does she see Turos die getting the sigil? Did she see Ilahn and Sephie getting the sigil and all that they've done since and this conflict that's been brewing between the two of them? We just don't get to know, unfortunately. But what this does tell us is that Ideria knows that she is going to die. And she chooses to accept this future regardless. Ideria is a flooping hero. Nothing in this comic would have happened if she hadn't chosen to walk this road and set up Sephie for success. Any mother, every mother, I suppose, chooses to sacrifice some portion of their life for their child. Ideria just takes that idea to the extreme. She knows it's coming and she goes, it doesn't matter. Sephie will be worth it. And so she goes forward with it. Part of the reason that I think that small aspect is important is because this really is Ideria's story. I could see a world in which this issue of Chronicles was like a twin tale kind of thing, where you would have Ilahn remembering his half of the experiences, and then you would have Sephie reading the perspective of her mother. And if Meridian was a comic that had 2 leading characters, I think that's something that might have happened. But I think that this story kind of cements the idea that Meridian is Sephie's story specifically. Our earlier narrative from the first roughly 7 issues, in which Sephie and Ilahn really share the role of lead character, has shifted. Ilahn has moved solidly into the category of the antagonist, of being a threat, and Sephie is now our heroic leading lady. Rather than centering the story on Ilahn, Kesel chooses to keep it centered on Ideria, setting her up as a role model for Sephie, knowing that real-world readers would look up to Sephie as the main character, and keeping this book with a distinctly female perspective, which is such a rare thing to get when you're reading comic books. And admittedly, I do think that there are more women writing comic books nowadays than there were previously, but even in 2000, when this would have been published, you would have been a lot harder pressed to find an ongoing series written by a woman starring a female character. There is a part of me that is curious to Ilahn's half of this story, and not because I need to know more about his day-to-day life or anything like that. He comes across as a creepy, possessive, murderous jerk quite well without being given any extra screen time here. What I'm left wondering is why he is this way. We saw that Ilahn was willing to kill his brother before. Again, Meridian opened with that very thing happening. But there's a degree, at least from me, where that murder attempt came after decades of life, of a quiet, unspoken jealousy slowly building up, of slights imagined or real piling, until Ilahn finally did something. And even when he did something, it was as subtle as hiring someone else to poison Turos over a long period of time. This story, however, indicates that Ilahn was willing to kill his own brother when they were in their 30s, maybe. Was it solely jealousy over Ideria? I kind of find it hard to believe, but I mean, it's the only thing Ilahn does in this issue is be a creep about Ideria. We don't really know what started the murderous divide between these 2 brothers, and I do think that this story could have been a perfect opportunity to explain it. And so I do think that's a little bit of a missed opportunity. And despite me wanting to see that, I don't think that knowing that or learning it here would have helped this specific story, nor would it have communicated anything to Sephie that she needed to know moving forward. It's something that I would like to see Meridian explore more in the future, look back at Ilahn's past a little bit, see what shaped him to being the murderous, power-hungry madman that he is. Because if it all happened here, I really feel like his desires are a bit unfounded. Overall, though, I mean, this issue works incredibly well. There are a number of great comic book writers who really seem to specialize in interpersonal drama, and I think that with this kind of issue, Barbara Kesel is just one of the best. I really dug the action sequences in this comic. Like, don't get me wrong. Looking at the stereotype of, like, I'm a dude and I want to see things explode, this issue does give me what I want. The action sequences are laid out well, but they tie into the larger overall emotional drama being played out between Turos and Ideria and Ilahn. Even if there were no action scenes in this comic, the stuff with Ilahn is super creepy. The back and forth relationship stuff between Turos and Ideria is so endearing that I think I would still super enjoy this comic. It's just really good character work. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what every story needs to be, is really interesting characters. You can mask a lot of uninteresting characters with explosions, just look at any Michael Bay movie, but if you do the work to create interesting characters, you don't need that kind of stuff. Or when you do get that stuff, it's like icing on your cake, and I think that's a lot of what we get here with this particular issue of CrossGen Chronicles. Next time, we will be returning to the present day of Meridian, and a bunch of stuff is going to happen. We're going to see Ilahn's time on Elysia go totally sideways. The Muse will visit the evacuees from Meridian with a dire message. Darren Beck is back. And Sephie gets herself a sweet new ride. Join me in a week for Comic Book Breakdown episode 32.13 of Meridian, Sephie's Inheritance. If you enjoyed this episode of Breakdown, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you are not subscribed to the show, then click on that as well. I love getting feedback, and I would really appreciate it if you did so. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to suggest a comic or a series to me, Breakdown can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and on a variety of podcast platforms, with links in the description for this episode below, as well as the email cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Thank you for your time and attention.